Hi, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name's Caroline, and this is Peachtober Week 4, created by Very Little Peach. I already have the first 3 weeks uploaded on this channel if you're interested in watching the process for those. I'll also link my Instagram and TikTok in the description below, where I've been posting these daily. You can find me on Instagram at arty_caro and TikTok at artycaro without the underscore. I'll also have all the supplies and materials I've been using in the description as well. Day 23's prompt was sprout. I had 2 main ideas for this prompt, the first being sprout as in growth, like a plant growing, and I thought I could do a frog flower or plant creation and it's just starting to grow out the soil. I ended up going for my second idea though, which was sprouts as in the vegetable, and I just don't like sprouts, so I created a frog at Christmas eating his Christmas dinner, being very disappointed that there's sprouts on his plate. It was a bit weird drawing something quite Christmassy considering it was still October at the time, but I did really enjoy it and it kind of started to make me feel festive early. This piece is heavily based upon my personal family Christmas experience. We typically wear Christmas jumpers on the day, so that was a must to include, and to be honest I probably own way too many because of this. We also normally have Christmas crackers and we'll do them before the meal, so everyone ends up wearing the hats during the meal, but by the end of it they've just slowly gone. That's if they've not broken in the first place, to be fair. Even the roast is based upon my typical Christmas dinner. Except for the sprouts, I normally just don't have sprouts because I don't like them, but they weren't necessary for this piece, so the frog could have the grossed out reaction and fit the prompt, of course. I also always have Yorkshire puddings, but I learnt recently that some people don't, which I find shocking because I love them so much, but it is because they're traditional with beef, so some people stick to that and just don't have them, but we love them so much we don't really care and we'll always have them with a roast dinner. I forgot to say earlier, for some context for those who have not watched my previous 3 videos, I've actually set a challenge for myself within doing the prompts every day, where I need to make each piece frog themed or include like a frog character within it. It's just to kind of bring a bit of consistency to my pieces, make them look a bit more like a collection, and I also just really love frogs, so any excuse to draw them I'll take. Day 24's prompt was castle. I mainly went with making a castle frog themed, but I do include a small little frog king character in one of the windows if you can spot him. The main elements I added to make it frog themed was a big massive self-portrait of the Frog King on his front door. I imagine this to be 3D, kind of like those metal door knockers you find that are lion heads. I also added frog handprints to the flag that's flying. This is because I imagine it being kind of like their emblem or the kingdom's crest. And finally I added lily pad shapes to the stony, muddy path leading up to the castle. So here I'm just suggesting that the actual stones in that path would be lily pad shaped themselves. I had a lot of fun with creating the stone texture on this castle, especially because I wasn't sure how I was going to do it at first, as I didn't want to draw each individual brick because that would be quite time consuming. So I ended up just drawing a few that I made quite prominent by using quite a dark grey and then going in with a lighter grey and just suggesting other bricks with little dots and marks. After I ended up outlining the little Frog King in his window, he kind of ends up looking a bit sad. So I kind of think the story behind this would be he was quite a self-obsessed, controlling king. Since he does have a massive self-portrait of himself on his door, he's got to be a bit arrogant. So he's ultimately kind of pushed people away, and now it's just a kingdom for him and no one else. So I do feel a bit sorry for the little guy, even though he probably caused it by himself. Day 25's prompt was robot. This is actually my second Doctor Who themed illustration that I've done so far in Peachtober, and funnily enough, for that one it was Bo, and I only drew 3 Doctors who wear bow ties in their main outfit, and my reasoning behind this was drawing all of them would be far too many frogs, but now I have drawn all of them, including the very new Doctor to be next year, the 15th Doctor, Ncuti. So I ignored myself basically. So the idea of this piece is that K9, who's a robot dog, is basically babysitting each version of the Doctor. We have the first Doctor just standing in his typical Doctor pose, holding his cane. I've got the second Doctor playing his recorder, but he's stacked on top of the 6th, the 7th and the 5th Doctor. I thought it'd be funny to do a frog stack, since that's kind of what they typically do anyway. I'm not really sure the reasoning why, but it is a thing. Then I have the 3rd Doctor playing either chess or draughts or something with the 12th Doctor. I mainly paired them together because Pete Capaldi loved John Pertwee as a Doctor, and you can definitely tell some of his Doctors a bit inspired by him, so it just felt right to put them together. We then got the 8th Doctor in front of K9, and I kind of based his pose off something he does in the movie where he's very happy for some reason or something, and just has his arms out, so I thought it'd be funny to have him in the middle. And then we got the 9th Doctor just chill, leaning on K9. Got the War Doctor hitching a ride with some luggage. Got Jodie helping 10 and 11 climb up K9. Got the 4th Doctor sat on K9, just on his head. And the Fugitive Doctor is looking out somewhere with a telescope. And then finally we got the 15th Doctor saying, what the hell is going on here? Because that is all we've seen him do so far in the teaser for Doctor Who next year. Although this piece was quite tedious to paint and draw, I do think it's really fun. And it's probably one of my favourite ones, at least idea-wise, so far. Day 26 prompt was land. And I actually end up combining 2 definitions for the word land within this piece. The first being land as in what we walk on, and so I drew a deserted island, and the second being land as in landing a plane. But in this case, unfortunately, it's a frog parachutist who has crash landed on this deserted island and also got himself tangled up in the palm tree itself, so he's not having a good day. And to make things even worse, it's not an island you'd want to land on. It's got a lot of death, people just die on it, there's skulls and bones everywhere, and the sharks lurking in the ocean below, waiting for people to just fall in. There ended up being a lot of small details in this piece, but because a lot of it is towards the bottom half of the piece and the top's a bit more free of heavy detail, I think it balances out well enough. I kind of really love the sharks in this piece in particular, just because they ended up looking derpy, and I know they're supposed to be scary, but it's funny to me when sharks look a bit derpy. One of my main aims for Peachtober has been to use coloured line work, especially as I find when you use black outlines, sometimes it can blend together a bit, especially if you're not varying your line weight and thickness. For all the pieces I've done so far, I've mainly done it in a way where I've outlined each element in a darker version of its colour, Whereas with this piece, I wanted to experiment with still using a coloured line work, but just using fewer colours. So all the elements in the sea I outlined in a dark blue, and then all the elements on the island I outlined in a light brown. I found the results were pretty much the same as when I outline each individual element in its own colour. It's just as effective as getting all these different elements to stand out, so it's definitely something I will play around with again. Day 27's prompt was sea. Originally, I had the idea of maybe doing like a frog diver, being surrounded by a bunch of different fish and sea creatures, but I'd already got a lot of focus on fish and sharks in the previous day's prompt, so I kind of wanted to have another element within this to be the main focus. Ultimately, I decided to do a big yellow submarine that the frog's travelling in, and he's just amazed to see all the fish that he's surrounded by. It wasn't until after I'd finished painting the piece that I realised that Yellow Submarine's obviously the Beatles song. I mainly just picked yellow because 1, it's my favourite colour, and 2, I knew I wanted to use a load of warm tones for the submarine, since blue's a cool colour and so it would contrast well against the ocean background. I chose to keep the submarine quite simple in both its shape and detail. This is mainly because I already knew I wanted to jam-pack the background with loads of fish, and I found that this actually made the submarine stand out quite well because it's so busy in the background, and especially because I stuck to 2 colours for the fish in the background because I thought it might be a bit too chaotic if I did loads of colours, and I also wanted to keep them different from the colours of the actual submarine. I also made the fish's colours quite cool so they would blend more with the background, so even though it's chaotic it doesn't kind of hurt your eyes too much, hopefully anyway. Like the previous day's post, I also explored using just a few select colours for this piece. I think it was specifically beneficial for the submarine itself, because if I'd just used a darkened version of its main colour, which was yellow, I just don't think it would have contrasted as well against the background as the bright red I ended up using did. Day 28's prompt was plants, and I decided to draw these cute little frog flowers. I'd already come up for the concept of them while brainstorming for the prompt sprout, so I actually decided to use it here since I didn't go through with it for that prompt. I have them all really happy and smiling, and in particular I really loved the middle guy's face. And because they're so happy, I decided to put them in like a welcome plot, so it kind of feels like they're all welcoming you to their house they're placed outside of. I found this piece to be quite a nice break from all the complicated detailed scenes that I'd been doing for the past few days' prompts. It was just nicer to draw some bigger shapes and not having to outline such tedious elements, although I still had fun drawing the other ones because they're quite jam-packed. But the paper I'm using is quite small, so it can be a bit challenging, especially when it comes to the line work. In general, I just had a lot of fun adding all the small details like the veins on the leaves, little lines on the petals and shading. Ultimately, it's quite a simple piece, but I really like it despite that, and it's probably up there with some of my favourites. And I just wish they exist, to be fair. I wish I had a bunch of frog flowers that I could just put in front of my future house one day to welcome people to it. Maybe one day I could sculpt some or something, that might be quite cool. but for now they're just this cute little illustration. Day 29's prompt was well. I mainly had two ideas for this prompt. The first being the kind of typical sailor stuck inside a well, kind of like from Pinocchio, and then the second one, which I went with, was that a sailor's just having a day out fishing and has accidentally caught a whale, although he doesn't know that yet. I kind of wanted to add a humorous tone to it as well, so I included a speech bubble of the sailor being like, oh, I hope it's a big one, and he's not wrong. He's actually not wrong. There is a lot of blue within this piece, so at first I was a bit worried that I wouldn't get the whale to stand out very well, but luckily I was able to create enough variation in different shades of blue to make him pop out a bit. I think it helped that I made the sea a very deep dark blue, and I think I even mixed some purple into it, which also helped. The main challenge was actually when it came to shading the whale. I kind of messed it up the first time and ended up having to paint him fully in the shade colour I'd mixed, so he is darker than I originally planned, but it still worked out in the end. I managed to salvage him a bit. I really enjoyed adding different tones of dots to his back. For some reason, this is the element that made me really feel like he looked like a whale. I focused on trying to make the colours for the sailor and the boat he's in kind of warmer tones, just to help make it stand out against the blue. Obviously, it kind of stands out against the blue anyway because it's the only part of the piece that isn't blue, but it's just an extra element to create contrast within the piece. Day 30's prompt was pet. I ended up keeping this piece quite simple, and the main inspiration behind it is that scene from 101 Dalmatians where you see the dog walkers walking their dogs and they just kind of look like each other. I really enjoy that scene and I think it's quite funny. So in this piece I've done a frog walking his little worm pet, and they're basically both just dressed as distinguished gentlemen. They've both got a purple top hat and an orange bow tie. I wanted to make the frog's outfit quite fun and not your like typical suit, so I kind of gave him a coat jacket that's got like a V at the bottom, and then I also added some patches to it because I think they can look quite fun, especially when they're like really bright coloured patches. I think it would be fun to do this kind of piece again, but on a bigger scale, so I could kind of explore adding a street view behind them. I did consider adding some buildings behind them as it was in this piece, but I found that it's such a zoomed in kind of view as it is, you just wouldn't see much of the building. Like, you probably wouldn't even see like a full front door or anything, so I decided just to leave it as sky in the end. But it's definitely one of those ideas that I think I could explore again and expand upon. now we have the very last day of Peachtober, where the prompt was sleep. Because it was Halloween itself on this day, I wanted to go with a Halloween theme in the piece, so I ended up doing a frog little witch that's had a busy night trick-or-treating and is now back home on top of her candy pile and just passed out in a candy coma. I chose to go with a witch costume as it's the thing I've been the most at Halloween, especially as a child. I did have a lot of variation in costumes, but there was definitely a couple of years where I just repeated being a witch. It's not based on any specific costume I've worn, but I have tried to use some colours that I remember them having, which was mainly purple and pink, I think. I also based her little Halloween bucket on the one I'd used, which was a pumpkin one. Mine wasn't quite as shaped as a pumpkin, but it did have the pumpkin face features on it. As I use a lot of cool colours for the frog herself and the outfit she's wearing, I chose to keep the background purely warm colours. I think this helps make her stand out, as I made the background quite chaotic, with it supposed to be in her on a big giant candy pile. I do draw quite a few individual sweets and I paint them in kind of dark oranges and reds, but the background I just leave yellow and paint little kind of dots and marks to suggest loads of yellow sweets in the background that are kind of just blurring all together. This would also work well, say, if she was on a pile of leaves or something instead. Before I decided on doing the Halloween theme for this last piece, I did come up with another idea where I thought about doing a small little frog sleeping inside a little flower. It was kind of both inspired by how field mice will sleep in little flowers, and also the film Thumbelina, where she spends a lot of her life sleeping in a walnut. I just thought it would be really cute, but I'm glad I went with this one because I only ended up doing one proper kind of Halloween spooky themed piece in this challenge, which was the potion prompt. Well, that's the end of Peachtober 2022. I've had a lot of fun doing this challenge and I look forward to participating again one year. Thank you all for watching this video and any of the others if you did. Let me know in the comments which was your favourite piece, and I'll see you next time for the next video.